Right, let's go.
Okay. Well, hello and welcome to the Record Players podcast, objectively the best opinion in music. Today we're going to be doing a review of Greta Van Fleet's new album, The Battle at Garden's Gate. Let's get into it.
Damn. I was like, he's brought the production value up here, but no.
What?
God damn.
What? How dare you? Okay. Australia's worse off on the world stage by the fact this guy is on the Spotify charts, I tell you. It was going so well. I had such high hopes for you.
I'm gonna pass over to Dennis. You're an engineer.
I felt this I wouldn't be surprised if I got this off someone off the street selling their CD for like £5. How do I stop it?
This is crazy.
Okay, before we get into it, guys, remember to like, share, subscribe, comment if you've got any comments, any thoughts as we go through the review. Remember to comment below and follow us on Twitter at @TRP_pod. Right, all that being said, let's get into it. Greta Van Fleet. I can't remember which one of you two suggested Greta Van Fleet. I think it was Hattie. I could be mistaken, but
it was Jack.
I was mistaken. It was Jack. I did not know what to expect. I'd never heard of Greta Van Fleet before we chose to do this album. And I literally did no prior research before doing my first listen. And I initially thought it was a solo artist, a female solo artist called Greta Van Fleet. And I pressed play.
This is rare for you as well, because you're the research dude, I would say.
Yeah, right. And I pressed play, and fucking Rush style vocals and like this classic rock, like Jimmy Page's Spirit comes through my speakers, and I'm like, oh crap, I'm in for a different kind of ride. So yeah, that was.
I've got my female singer songwriter headphones on.
Yeah,
I have to return these now.
Exactly. So just a bit of background on the band. Made up of 4 guys. 3 are brothers, Jake, Josh, and Sam. Jake, I believe, is lead guitarist, plays a Gibson SG, and I'd like to get into the tone of that Gibson SG because that tone all day. Josh, I believe, is the singer. Josh Kiska, I believe, is the singer, and Sam plays bass, and they have another guy, Danny Wagner, who they've known since 1st grade, I believe, who plays drums, and they've been playing music since their teenage years. And they released one album that had a couple of shout outs from some high profile people, been touring for the last, I think, year and a half-ish, something like that, and just dropped this new album, huge album. So Jack, you suggested this album. Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
How did you hear about Greta Van Fleet to begin with?
This was a recommendation from one of my mates, Walters. He's very into like kind of British rock and that sort of stuff. So like the Strokes, that sort of area, almost indie, but a bit like, less poppy. And I think he suggested the From the Fires, which I think might be their first big release. To me,
because this is a second album, right? Second studio, I believe.
Third. They had a couple of EPs, and
so they had From the Fires, and they had Anthem of Peaceful Army 3 years ago now, and then this one this year. I was basically he basically just told me, like, I've got this band, I've heard a couple of tracks from them, they're sick. I know you like Led Zeppelin. I think you'll like them, which I think is probably something that people are tired of hearing in relation to Greta. But yeah.
But fair enough.
I can imagine 90% of interactions with introducing a band go exactly like that.
Yeah.
Guys, let's be real. Josh is doing his best. Yeah, he's doing his best Robert Plant impression,
and he's fucking doing it.
Yeah, he's
giving it some willing.
He's smashing it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some of the songs. Well, let's not create sections. I wanted to bring up one song in particular. I think it's "Age of the Machine." "Age of the Machine" has like these like welling vocals, which literally like it's almost exactly the type of thing you expect to hear from Robert Plant. So yeah, like you say, he has mimicked him. It's crazy the level of detail to which they're so similar. I mean, who is there anybody else you can think of vocally, Jack, that does sort of welling vocals like that? Sort of, I can't remember a Zeppelin song that does it. But if you do you know what I mean?
It's a feature that I would attribute to like a lot of this style of music. So like the not quite as heavy, the area between the kind of blues, prog, and metal, that classic rock, but that section of it is something you'll sort of hear a fair amount. But I don't think anyone else does it quite as well or quite as reminiscently of Robert Plant.
So do you mean like that sort of that progression from blues rock? So bands like the Rolling Stones, who started off as a sort of rhythm and blues band, but then became more of a blues rock and roll band. Do you mean that era where those types of bands were coming up?
Yeah.
That kind of style, that welling effect, right?
What do you mean by welling?
It's like it kind of comes in and out. It starts off quiet. It changes in dynamics. I think it's probably right after the first chorus. Maybe it goes into this welling section.
Was like what I'm thinking of is
interesting terminology I've not heard before.
A lot of that stuff is like that's an adaptation of blues style, because people like Howling Wolf and that were like, they're known for giving you this like really rough, really like sort of style of doing it, and then that kind of that developed through the rock and roll in the 50s as the kind of just shouting and then like harsher vocals and stuff like that. And then now obviously there's a bit more nuance required because it's a developed genre. But yeah, I would say it's you're not going to find it in the like the Kisses that came from rock into classic rock, rather than like you'd find it more in the AC/DCs that came from blues into classic rock.
Two bands that seem to be a mainstay that come up in every one of our reviews: Kiss and AC/DC, much to my chagrin.
I've got to get you to a certain level of annoyance in every episode. It's in my contract.
Right, Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they are doing their best. Well, at least Josh is doing his best Robert Plant impression, but I didn't think the rest of the band really is comparable to Led Zeppelin. I would say the rhythm section in particular, so the bassist and the drummer, I would say are very middle of the road. They play very safe, and maybe that's because of the audience, perhaps, that the kind of audience for classic rock doesn't want anything sort of crazy and out there, that they want to sort of play it safe. For instance, Good Times, Bad Times, Led Zeppelin. Do you know those triplets? The triplets on John Modern's triplets.
Infamous drum intro.
Yeah, those little those little flourishes that you get every once in a while.
Yeah, it makes the song.
It's dangerous. You don't know what's going to come next. Whereas this, to me, the rhythm section in particular feels very, very middle of the road. The guitarist and the singer are top tier, in my opinion. But I would say the rhythm section is playing very safe. I don't know. What do you guys think?
There was one song that stood out that I thought the bass and drums were highlighted. Track 7, Stardust Chords. It was kind of quite a few drum fills, and the bass was kind of doing a melody as opposed to kind of just filling out that rhythm section. That was the only one that stood out to me as putting those instrumentalists on show. As one of my preferred tracks, actually. But
I think there's definitely times when you can hear a bit of Ginger influence on the drums. There's a lot of like I think less so on this album maybe than their earlier stuff, but there's a couple of times where you can see they are picking up like midway through a bar or something, which is like something that Led Zeppelin would have done all the time, and they do it with guitar as well. But just to have like an established pattern, goes for 4 bars, starts again with bar 1, but instead of the drums coming in on beat 1, they're coming in halfway through beat 3. That did happen on this album. I can't remember what track it happened on. But I think generally,
I think I know what you
you're
mean.
saying
Is
is
it
right.
fair play? I think that was one of my. I think it's Built by Nations. I think because it reminded me of Houses of the Holy, where it's like and that it plays with that that downbeat. It plays with that downbeat as the song goes along, and yeah, there was one song on here that is that sort of what you mean?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, there's a literal like pickup beat, like an anacrusis type thing that I mean, but I'll find it at some point and come back to it.
Okay, let's not go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah,
I gotta jump in.
Go ahead.
Now go on, Jack.
I was just gonna say, like, I think that other works are probably better examples of what the rhythm section's capable of than this album. Just stylistically, I think it was a bit limited on here.
Well, this is one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, because they've been touring for a long time, I believe. I think they've been touring for about a year and a half constantly, and they haven't.
How's that been possible?
What do you mean? Oh, before the pandemic.
Okay.
So even up to 2019, they were about to go on tour some more in 2020, and then the pandemic happened, obviously.
Right.
I believe before that they'd been touring for quite a long time before they did their previous release of an album. Now, I was going to ask you guys, do you think that affected the kind of songs that get written? Because you do hear of throughout history of bands that go on long tours, and it affects them. For example, the Beatles are famous for that they used to do these long tours in Eastern Europe, right? Do you think that came through, Hattie? Do you think that came through these songs?
It's difficult because I don't really have the frame of reference. I was aware of them as a band, but I'll be honest, I haven't really listened to them, and up until this album, so I only have this to go on.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be best acquainted for answering that question, in all honesty. I mean, the mimicry of the 70s rock is so apparent here, that it's hard to even consider them as a band that's making music right now.
No,
I don't think I've heard a band that's so like accurately replicating like an era that's, what is it, like 40, 50 years ago now. I mean, I got to be honest, I got some problems, even though I do love music from that era, and Zeppelin is probably my favorite rock band from the 70s, at least. I thought a lot of this wasn't great, to be honest.
I thought I was going to be bringing the hot takes, really.
And particularly my biggest gripe was the singer.
Really?
Yeah. I again, yes, he's mimicking Robert Plant for the most part. At some points, Geddy Lee even.
Yeah. The first primarily track, Heat Above, gave me Geddy vibes.
But I don't know. He just lacks something. His voice is just a bit. It's just a bit thin. And what annoyed me is on half of the tracks, he's straight up yodeling.
Right.
Like his use of vibrato just grinds my fucking gears and actually dragged down what was, a lot of times enjoyable, like instrumental work. But this singer actually like ruined the album for me.
I think I've watched one or two live videos. I mean, they did. You can on YouTube at home. You can hunt it down. I think they did a live performance on KCRW, and they've done a couple more just live performances and throw them out there. And I think he sounds a little bit different live than in the studio. Well, the song that I saw done was, I think, Highway Tune, and to me, Highway Tune, I think, is from their previous album. Sounds like he's doing more of a Robert Plant impression. It sounds like, to me, I listened to some of.
How can you get more than this?
That's the thing. I listened to some of their previous stuff, and some of their previous stuff. This
it was even more like so.
yeah, it sounds like this is more of a deviation. Like it's.
I don't see how that's possible. Again, I don't have the frame of reference because I haven't listened to them like Jack has. But I like I said, I don't see how it's possible.
What do you think, Jack? Do you? To
Are
me,
we just talking purely
is...
vocal style wise here in terms of the deviation?
Yeah, I guess I'm focusing. I was focusing on the singer.
So I have like there is some development here from previous albums in that he's doing more of stuff like the really raspy kind of pushed vocal that he's made a kind of a feature. So it's almost like you might have a riff that ends with a harmonic on a guitar, and like it's just a different way of playing a note, so it's not as generic all the way through. I thought that stuff was really cool here. That's something he's not really done before. But yeah, as well as I think the yodeling is a good description for it, because he's not been that.
It's everywhere, man.
It's not been that over. But my main gripe with it on this album is that sort of stuff always seems to be happening on top of some lead guitar, when there are so many sections that repeat, like with the same instrumentation or very, very similar material at the very least, like second choruses, second verses and stuff. That's the perfect time to have a backing track. If you want to warble as a singer, that's the time to chuck it in when you're the lead instrument anyway. Don't wait for there to be a guitar solo or a guitar fill and then give us a over the top of it. Like that really got to me, like over the course of the whole album.
Yeah,
separate.
It got me. It got me off to a bad start, because I think one of the most prominent examples was the first track. So again, I'm coming in kind of like you, Dennis, with fresh ears. And the first track, Heat Above, is, like I said, one of the most egregious examples of that vocal style. And it's over a generally happy, upbeat song, which I don't think was one of their best. Again, the songs that I gravitated towards were more of the slower, epic tracks. But this was a major key upbeat one, and he's just doing that shit. And I was like, if I'm going to listen to an hour of this, I'm done. I mean, luckily it wasn't like that throughout, but it was not a good track to put on the beginning. I thought it was I thought it was a great way to open.
I thought it was very different. Like, having something, like you're saying, having something that's a bit more upbeat and something that catches you immediately from the start, I thought was quite smart. And it's giving you you could argue whether this is like it's kind of chicken and the egg. Are they giving you all the elements of the stuff they're going to go through in the album in a track, or is it just that this is a track of the album that has all that stuff on, so it's going to have it in? But they've got nice like instrumentation. They've got those rolling syllables, which I think is what you're talking about. Which if it is I like it as a feature. I like it as a style. I think it was slightly overused, but maybe not to the same degree as you. And yeah, using like organs, violins, and the synths backing stuff up, pairing the vocals with the harmonic content and like matching it, almost moving homorhythmically, but more like melody and accompaniment where it's kind of embellishing what's there in the backing. I thought all that sort of stuff for the first track was really good. I had more of a problem with the tracks later on that were more prog influenced, but because they've locked themselves into this like blues rock style, they've not opened themselves up to the breadth of going to the like. They don't go to Pink Floyd's super synthy, spacey area. They don't go to like, really, really heavy stuff that like some prog metal. Like there's no Between the Buried and Me influence here, where they're going from full like weird key instruments into like proper grindy pig guttural screaming sounds. They're really locked in a sound, so it got a bit repetitive just having like longer tracks of the same material.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the other thing I want to bring up. It was 12 tracks over, what was it, like an hour 10 or something?
Hour 3.
With about length, as always.
I mean, I don't like length anyway, but when you have so many similar songs with a similar sound, and like I said, it's aping a genre or style that there's so much music out there from, I couldn't believe it. Like, you do not need to make an album this long.
I think
like,
the length,
if you're doing this, if you're replicating sound, it could have easily trimmed 4 or 5 tracks, maybe elongated some of the tracks, some of the tracks that had differences between each other. But this was overfilled.
I think I would rather trim like a minute or so from tracks. Say like we take 5 or 6 tracks and take a minute off rather than cut tracks entirely. Because as I went through, there wasn't like one. There wasn't like a moment I hit where I'm like, this is well below the level of everything else on the album. I was just a bit worn out, like the further it went along.
Yeah, I didn't think there was any bad songs. There's any songs that I hated going through the album. Going back to Heat Above, I think I'm kind of with Hadi on this. I mean, I thought, well, I'm with Hadi on with some in some areas, and I'm with Jack in other areas. I liked Heat Above. I thought it was an okay opener, but I didn't think it was a good single, because I think this Heat Above and My Way Soon are the two singles.
There's Broken Bells and Age of Machine were singles.
Right. I didn't think this Heat Above is worthy of being a single. I preferred some of the slower, more sort of atmospheric and more epic songs towards the middle of the album.
Me too. So, like I said, the first 2 tracks, I was, especially that first one, and it was Broken Bells was the first track where I was like, okay, there's something maybe in here for me. When the tempo slowed down and it was a bit more kind of dramatic and epic feeling, that's where I thought they kind of came into their own across a few tracks. So it's interesting you brought that up.
Yeah, let's go into top 3, if you don't mind. Do we need to bring up a graphic, Jack?
Nope.
I don't think
too much work.
I shall keep waffling in that case. So right, I'll start at number 3 and we'll work our way back. My number 3 was Barbarians. My number 2 was Age of the Machines, and number 1 was Built by Nations. Hadi, what was your top 3, and comments on mine, if you have any?
What was the last one you said? Barbarians.
Barbarians number 3.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Barbarians, the interesting thing I got with that was the intro guitar solo had again, like I said, I liked a lot of the instrumentation, and the intro guitar solo to that gave me a John Frusciante vibe, which I was pretty hyped about. So, again, most of my beef was focused on the vocal style, or so the vocalist specifically, but that was an interesting.
Well, just to go into that point a little bit more, what did you think? Because it sounds like you guys were listening quite closely to the guitar, obviously. What did you think of the guitar tone? Because I loved that SG guitar tone.
Yeah, it was thick. It was thick. The leads were good, tasteful, and the tone was good. Yeah. He was definitely maybe the standout member.
Yeah,
I thought there's more scope for his playing. Like, I think he's kind of. I think because he's a very good player, but he's in a particular band. Like I think this album to me is just like it feels very pigeonholed, because his playing is great, but what he actually plays is so similar on every track. Like it's all the expected blues licks just like taped together into a solo, and then on each track he'll have maybe 1 or 2 bars that's actual like interesting melodic content you might not expect to find here, and that's the time where I'm like, oh, that's sick, that's really good, and then it'll go back into and I'm like, okay, yeah, we're back in the 70s blues rock again.
But that's a good summary of everything. They, like I said, they mimic that's like the Zeppelin style, well, in every person's department, to varying degrees, but it never goes all the way. You never have like a moment that think, oh, it's like a classic Jimmy Page solo, or like you said, Dennis, there's never a standout bass part that sticks in your head. It's just a good safe replica of another band or a couple of bands from the same decade period.
Well,
a good example against that, I would say, was the last track, "The Weight of Dreams," which was the kind of prog, long, epic track. And again, I wish they did more than that. That was one of my favorites, and I wish that they strayed away from the kind of safe, 4 or 5 minute song that sound the same as the others, and go to something like that last track. More often have songs that have more dynamics. uncommon song structures, that deviate. That's probably what's gonna take them from being like an okay band for some to a good band for others.
So to you, is that how you do this style in the modern day? You need to play with song structure. You need to play with all these modern techniques.
I think so, because otherwise, what's the point? You're basically a tribute band, or a legacy band. If you progressive music, back in the day and throughout time is all about kind of changing and trying things new. So they can take the general sonic aesthetic, but song structure and things like that is what's going to push them above kind of just being copycats, I think.
What about you, Jack? Like, how do you think you do this style in the modern day? Do you think it's like you do it like Paul Gilbert, for instance, in Mr. Big, where you do that sort of bluesy thing, but then you make it modal and you throw in interesting harmonic ideas and melodic ideas?
If it was me personally, how I would do it would be to have this style as the kind of the basis, or the kind of, this is the first color you're going to put on your palette, and then depending what song you're writing and how it fits in, you start taking from other genres and you mix those into the color that you've got as your base tone. So like, that's a lot of what we've done with Shordag when we've composed and stuff like that. So we'll have like that heavy rock, almost metal as the kind of basis, and then sometimes you'll find funk influence, but whether it's chords or like a riff that's using syncopation, and sometimes you'll find like more of a blues one if we're using like a blues scale to make a particular riff or something. It just depends how the song goes. But this is like, it's a bit too much in one place.
I agree. Incorporate other genres and again, the different song structures with this bass. That would be the perfect way to progress. Because I mean, are they gonna release 10, 20 albums over like 30 years that are going to be exactly like this?
But here's the problem, because I think what you just described, Jack, is a jazz album. Correct? You've just described basically a Mr. Bungle album.
If you use jazz as your core genre, then yes. If you have jazz and then you add some rock to it, or you add some funk to it, or you add some blues to it, you still have a jazz album, because jazz incorporates those things. If you start with rock and you incorporate some jazz, that's a different thing. If you start with rock and you incorporate some funk, that's a different thing. Like if you start with rock extreme, and you incorporate funk,
the band extreme,
you've got Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't call them jazz, even though like you could make some comparisons, but not. It depends what order you add them in. Like the mixology becomes a bit weird.
Yeah,
a band that does a very good blend of having their songs feel different, within an album, but also having a sound that very much dates back to a certain time. That I'd recommend if you guys haven't heard is Alabama Shakes. I think they broke up now, but I think they're a good example of doing something that sounds from the past, but also keeping it fresh. That kind of feel like these guys missed the mark on. But just first one that came to my head.
So give us your top three tracks from the album.
Me?
Yeah.
Like I said, I did have some tracks that I enjoyed. So Broken Bells, I already mentioned it. Kind of that was the first track that caught my ear. Like I said, I like the kind of mellow, lush, ambience of the track. Loads of heavy reverb, and there was a thick guitar solo on that. My second track was probably Stardust Chords. Again, that one I think had quite a bit of emphasis on the bass and drums, and there was a cool string arrangement at the end, so I like that one. And then the final track, The Weight of Dreams. So again, coming back to what I'm saying, the first song kind of felt like they were maybe deviating from the standard kind of replica. Again, having a long song that kind of changes throughout, that caught my ear, and I was fucking glad, because probably like the 4 tracks leading up to that, I was switched off. So there's some good stuff on here, but like I said, there were good tracks despite my problems with the singer on nearly every track.
Because you said like the 4 tracks leading up to this, have you guys listened to this not as a complete hour and 3 minutes of continuous music? Have you listened to it broken up or anything like that?
I did a couple of listens, maybe 2 listens all the way through. and I did one listen where I did the first 6 and the last 6.
Okay, yeah. Could my
That's a problem right there, though. If you have to do that.
Yeah.
Do you think so though? Because like
yes,
but if you're like, if you're picking out either half of Stadium Arcadium, I thought of double album just to make it better. But if you take just the first one,
that was a ridiculously long album, horrendous choice.
But if you just take like the first half of the first album, even that by itself is quite long. But you can listen to it in 2 sittings and not be like, this is because I hate. Like, this is because this is a bad album. You can just be like, this is because I don't feel like. I don't have time.
The length,
or anything like that. What were you going to say?
The length isn't. I don't dislike this album because of length. That's just something that's a problem on top of other problems.
But I don't think
it's possible. It's possible to do a long album to be good, but it's very fucking hard. And especially when you're not deviating your sound a lot, it becomes near impossible to achieve that goodness.
Yeah.
Stadium Arcadium is a good example. That could have been trimmed into a single album that would have been on par with one of their best. That would have been Californication level potentially if it was one fucking album.
So I don't think an hour of music's too long.
Yeah, I could do this in one sitting, but I wouldn't.
It's pushing.
For this particular album, it feels long. Because an hour's not a long time of music to sit down.
It's not super long, but like I said, you need to justify it, and to do that, you need some diversity somewhere.
Yeah, I mean that's why I wouldn't come back and do a listen like that. I would maybe pick out favorites, but I don't think there's enough on this album. I don't think there's enough meat on this album to justify doing multiple whole listens. Like for instance, what I've been listening to, like Brockhampton, the review we did a couple of weeks back. I would gladly do back to finish re-listens to that because there's things you can pick out of it, whereas I don't think there's, in terms of what in the lyrics, you're not going to pick up much in the lyrics. I mean, if you're used to reading hip hop lyrics, this is basically nothing. The lyric sheet for this is like 3 verses, basically. And like you said, Hadi, there's no. Well, you agreed with me that there's not enough sort of little flourishes here and there to. It's very middle of the road. There's not enough little flourishes to justify coming back again to find that nice little guitar lick, that nice little bass, I don't know, trill or whatever. So yeah, I wouldn't do another hour-long sit down with this.
What I was asking to kind of find out is because the first time I listened to this, I had to listen to it in pieces because I was listening in the car and I was out and about, like just doing stuff. But I liked it a lot more in the first listen. I think there's 2 reasons I want to pick out for it. One is that coming through speakers, it was way more impactful. So like the nuances that aren't even compositional, they're just like playing. So like the way that each chord is hit is slightly different, even if you're going for exactly the same sound. So like the second verse will be slightly different to the first verse, just because the second bar, even if it's the same chord, is different to the first bar. Like that's something that I was missing out when I was listening through headphones. And yeah, having it broken up gave me a bit of respite from that style. So I feel like I agree, if they'd switch it up more, it would be easier to get through the hour of listening. But
it's failed as an album if you have to put yourself in that position where you need to break it up. And so many albums are victim to that. This isn't just a standalone example. To consider the value of something as an album, it's failed because you're enjoying it better in separate parts.
I don't think that's true, because I think you can have albums where the albums can just be collections of songs. As somebody who is a massive advocate of having journeys in albums and having like a musical beginning and end and a through path, they can also just be collections of songs.
Yeah, they can do. They can be, but I feel like to get to that upper echelon of album quality. Yeah, you're not for me to get to that upper echelon, it needs to, not saying it has to be a concept album, but it needs to have a flow that's, and a balance that's
Yeah.
you know, it feels like so pre-planned, like albums that are my favorite albums, you know, they all fit together and they kind of feel like you have to listen to them back to front.
Yeah,
You know, albums that I would consider like the, you know, the best or like top tier albums.
Yeah, I appreciate a perfect album, shall we say? I know, sticking to sort of the Led Zeppelin theme. Yeah, I would think Led Zeppelin. I would say Led Zeppelin 1 is pretty much a perfect album. There's not a single song on there that I don't like. Whereas,
Yeah, it's probably my favorite.
I would say once you get to, say, Led Zeppelin 3, I get these kind of mixed up. I don't want to get this. Or yeah, Led Zeppelin.
Well, 3 was a more folksy one. They stripped it back on that one, so I know.
Yeah. There's one or. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say. I mean, I think generally they're considered to have like pretty much a perfect run up until maybe Physical Graffiti. I don't know. I'm pretty sure 1 through 4 are now considered to be like
perfect.
Yeah,
iconic. Yeah, but
I think a lot of people would put Houses of the Holy in that now as well.
Yeah.
No,
like I said, I think 3 is probably considered the black sheep because it's more folksy and it doesn't it doesn't have the kind of balls to the wall rock vibe that the others did. You know, it still is, but not to the same extent. There's a lot more.
Yeah, it's not perfect. Again, it doesn't. I am a fan. But yeah, even Led Zeppelin 3 though, it's got Immigrant Song, so it's got 1 or 2 songs here and there. Since I've Been Loving You.
I love that. That's one of my favorites.
An hour 24, Led Zeppelin 3. This is an album I would prefer to listen to in sections. If I was gonna I would pick tracks off this rather than listen to the whole thing anyway. But if I was gonna sit down and listen to a full hour 24 of this album, I wouldn't want to sit down and just listen back to back to back. Ideally, I'd like spread it out a little bit. That would be how I would enjoy this more. But I don't think this is a bad album at all.
Yeah, calling it a failure, I think, is a bit extreme. I like I said,
it fails as an album. As a lover of the album format, I'm not saying I hated it, and I'm not saying it's fully bad. I'm just looking at it from like a lens of appreciating the album format in an era where like no one really gives a fuck.
Yeah, as a connoisseur of curating an album.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like back in time, like they are with all the songs they write.
Okay, without letting this go on forever, this stream go on forever. Jack, give us your top 3.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle between you guys with the choices. I think Built by Nations was probably my favorite. I didn't really like Broken Bells or Age of Machine on first listen. Well, like I didn't dislike them, but they didn't like stand out.
Tracks. You favoured the more upbeat tracks overall, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Built by Nations
was kind of the opposite.
Yeah, having Built by Nations in between them was kind of like that. Probably highlighted to me. That track is the one I'm looking for, rather than the two it's bookended with. I loved that it starts with that blues riff. It's very like Black riff. Doggy, very like
comes back
heartbreakery, all that sort of stuff. It's got that.
It was a good riff.
that
driven raspy vocal style that we were talking about is also like another deviation between our listening of this album. I think for tracks like this, I'm all for it. I think it elevates on this track, whereas in the other places in the album it can be a bit abrasive. There's more. So this is another one as well where the guitarist. I don't think there's enough on this album where like it was. Hendrix is kind of the most well-known person for doing this, but his like rhythm style was mixing that. You'd have a chord introduced or suggested by his harmonic content. He'd then vamp around it for a bit until the next chord was introduced or suggested by the harmonic content. This is a track where that happens. They'll have chords like brum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, brum. You're moving between chords with actual interest in between. There wasn't enough of that on this album. There was too much just like strumming for me. When you know what they're capable of as a section, like that space for rhythm bass to take over, but it just never jumped in.
But you see, that's why I asked, like, do you think their touring has affected their songwriting? Because you'd think if you're so used to playing in front of thousands of people, you don't want to be throwing complex ideas at these thousands of people. You want to simplify it so that you send the raw message. And I guess the raw message would be a simplified harmonic and melodic content.
It could be. I think these songs hit harder live than they would on album. So I think that's definitely would have been, you know, at least a subconscious influence on it. But I don't know if that's like a conscious decision they've made.
Subconscious though.
Could be.
That's what I'm getting at. Because I did watch an interview with them where, they did mention that touring helps them touring for long periods of time. Sam was saying this, that touring for long periods of time helps them sort of develop ideas. So I guess, backstage or whenever they get a chance, they're playing with these ideas whilst getting that regular practice. I don't know, as someone who hasn't ever tasted that professional musician life, I wouldn't know what it is that they're going through whilst on tour anyway. So basically I couldn't comment really.
I think for any bands touring for that long would be an impact, but I wouldn't say I could directly correlate it with the decisions they've made without knowing them, or, you know, seeing an interview where they were asked specific questions. Final thing on Built by Nations, though, it starts with the solo at 2:55. Is still quite short. I'd love a longer one, but begins with a pre-bend, which is one of those few like moments where you're almost like,
then it comes down.
Yeah, we're about to have like a Pageian, I'm going to take this block of things you know about the blues and I'm going to invert them, or I'm going to, you know, throw the rule book out the window. Like, it's one of those fewer moments on the album where you're like, I can see a bit of like development of your own thinking along it, rather than kind of ticking the box with like, yeah, this sounds bluesy, and slapping it in. Which is a bit derogatory because they're like, I don't dislike the guitar work, but I feel like there's more potential unused. My second one was Weight of Dreams, like Hadi. I think they'd been hinting at being prog the whole album, the whole time. They'd been doing these things that I don't think served the songs in the interest of being, you know, more progressive. I think a lot of their 5-6 minute tracks could have been 4-minute tracks, and I wouldn't have been too unhappy about it. But again, this is it's another longer track. It has actual interest along the way, though, rather than just repeated sections. And there's 2.5 minute solo in it, which is something that I was absolutely gagging for by this point in the album, because where was that the rest of the time? Dude gets like 16 bars, and a lot of the time he's got a guy screaming over the top of him. So yeah, that was really nice to get.
This was them being like, all right, we've got to do a Stairway type song, you know?
Yeah, there was some odd choices, because I think one of the things that stood out to me, like stylistically from this, there's back in the day, a lot of music recording techniques were being discovered, and it was such an innovative time for that sort of technology that a lot of people were trying stuff out, like having live panning when recording and sort of stuff like that. So Zeppelin were a band that were trying all that sort of stuff out, and they had some really, really weird tracks because of it. Here, during that solo, at about just after 5.5 minutes, they like hard bend out, they hard pan out on a bend, and then bring it back to the middle as the bend gets released. And I can see what they were going for, but it just makes that really thick, nice SG guitar tone we've had the whole time. It just spreads it out and just makes it really thin. And then it comes back together and it's a nice round tone. And then they chuck it out the other side for the next bend and it's really thin, and then they draw back in. So like, there's a lot of stuff that they were trying in on this song. A lot of it hit. Some of it I think is a bit kind of misplaced, or could have done with a bit more curating.
I kind of like that, but I didn't have qualms with the production throughout. Just as a point, I mean, we haven't brought it up too much, but I thought it was the production and the mixing did well to kind of faithfully replicate a sound, but also have a modern crispness and sheen to it without being too overproduced. That was one of the album's strengths, I thought. But I know what you mean. Even something down to kind of like the panning. That's again kind of almost like replicating that experimental experimental vibe that those original bands would have done. So yeah. And a lot of that stuff I don't like in hindsight, but it didn't detract from it here for me.
I think it was an idea they carried on a little bit, and it sounded stronger in the next section. I think this was like this was a particular time where they had slow bends, so it was such an emphasized effect that it kind of it really just kind of stood out to me, immediately pulled my ear. And the last one for me, this one was a bit tough. I'm less sure on this one than I am on the others, but I picked Stardust Chords because like the military snare and the stuff, like it fit the story of the album better than most of the other tracks on it, which I think is another bit of a missed trick they could have had, because they've called it Battle at Garden's Gate. I'm sure the lyrics generally mention things like that along the way, but where's the it doesn't have to go full Metallica 1, but give me something to let me know that you're thinking about this as a holistic, like you're saying, Hattie, give me something to let me know this is an album, something that shows me you're thinking about this as a full body of work with interest and a unique element amongst your other material that pins it together. That could have served it so well, especially when a lot of the tracks are ending with kind of fade out, or ending with like a quieter outro section and then a couple of seconds of silence and then the next track begins. That's an ideal time to just have something like, if it's a more modern war you want to talk about, thinking of Metallica again, just have the sounds of helicopters quietly going over in between the tracks,
right? Or
pops or explosions just mixed in quietly, something that creates a bit of an audioscape.
Just lead-ins.
Lead-ins
to the next track.
But yeah,
have a good transition.
They had some nice references to that on this track, and then it turns into an actual groove, which is another thing that was slightly missing. There was too many chord patterns, strumming patterns on this album to me, and not enough groove, which I think is part of like you were saying before, the drums and the bass aren't
Rhythm
like prominent in here. It would have been nice to have some true like syncopated drums that are like hitting maybe 1 and 3, but then in between they're just completely off kilter, like something like that. And this is like as close as they got to that, but it would have been nice to have some more of it. And again, there's a mid-bar pickup for the solo, which is something I've not really thought about in years, but yeah, it happens quite a few times on this album, and I like it.
Nice. Yeah, I agree that I think the band is very unevenly weighted. I think the singer and the guitarist, Josh and Jake, are just so good. They can hit. They have. Well, yeah, sure. Josh might be doing a Robert Plant impression, but he's still got chops. The guitarist has chops. And Sam and Dan, because what I did was they were getting compared to Led Zeppelin so much that I actually just shuffled Led Zeppelin after listening to the album, just so I can like do a quick comparison. And yeah, the biggest difference that stands out is that rhythm section, because when best example of that is something like Good Times, Bad Times, where everyone is just being a badass, no one left behind. You've got John Paul Jones has a solo in that, and he has his own solo. I think it goes through one channel, and then the guitar solo is through the other channel.
Yeah, there was no weak link with Zeppelin.
Yeah. Whereas, unfortunately, I think the rhythm section, maybe because they've been playing for years, maybe it's a stylistic thing that the style is forcing them into toning themselves down, and maybe they'll be more adventurous as time goes on.
I hope so, because I don't think it's like, if you want to imitate the 70s, you can't say, oh, we're held back by the genre that we play in, because the 70s was all over the fucking shop.
Yeah, that's it. Tell them to replicate King Crimson or something like that. They won't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, right. So shall we? Before we give this album a rating, any final thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I was I was quite excited having listened to their other albums when they came out a fair amount, and liking them. But this was a bit of a letdown. It wasn't a huge letdown. I'm not like massively disappointed by it, but it didn't hit the high I was hoping it would.
You preferred previous efforts?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Right. Let's give this a rating then. Personally, I thought this album was fire. I enjoyed it, and I think I will enjoy coming back to listen to it again, maybe in chunks. Hattie, what rating would you give this?
And when you got to say chunks, like again, it comes back to like, how can you say a fire album needs to be listened to in chunks? Anyway,
Fire Star.
Yeah, one of our fabled asterisks. Yeah. I mean, there were moments that I enjoyed in this album. Like I said, I thought in general, like I said, the instrumentation and the production was good, but the length, the singer in general, and the lack of deviation pulled it in the other direction for me. So overall, it's a scratch CD for me.
Wow.
Do you mean a ribbon?
Oh yeah, sorry, it's a ribbon.
You are living in the past.
I'm back in the 70s of our review eras.
Yeah.
So apologies.
Seriously going to give these guys a participation ribbon for this effort? These Grammy Award winners who have been shout out by Elton John.
They won a Grammy?
Fuck a Grammy.
No, not for this though, surely.
Taylor Swift wins
best rock album.
Yeah,
Dennis, Taylor Swift wins album of the year every year that she releases an album. You're talking to me about the Grammys? Fuck off.
All right.
This is
into grumpy old men
with a better vocalist that sounds a bit more original. It could have fell in that middle ground, but I'm not going to listen to this again. No way.
Participation ribbon, Jack.
This is a quintessential backpat. Like, it's not offensive, regardless what Hattie's personal gripes with the singer are. But like it's there's nothing stands out about it, but nothing offends me about it.
I gotta say, the imitation thing did get to me. So I get where you're coming from.
Why is it a fire then?
Because
why is it a fire and you can't even listen to it as a whole album?
Because
listen to what you're saying.
But you wouldn't listen to the Song Machine, right? You wouldn't listen to Song Machine all the way through every single time you listen to it. And if you listen to it in sections, you wouldn't be crying thinking, "Oh, I've missed out by not listening to this whole album all the way through." Like, even with that album, for me, that's not a fire album without the tracks that aren't even on the main release.
On the bonus, yeah.
So, like, if you want to talk about albums like as an art form, that's what my counter to slating this would be.
Song Machine did feel like a compilation, though. It didn't feel like a studio album. And there's positives and negatives to that, but that definitely didn't have the kind of standard album, structure or format.
Maybe that was because of the way it was composed remotely.
It's almost the opposite to this album. This album has the same sound throughout. Song Machine has so much deviation that they fall on different spectrums completely.
So I was going to say that, yeah, the imitation did get to me, but I took the time to get to know the band. I watched a lot of interviews, learned sort of the history of where they've come from, etc. And to me, this is a band that's been thrown. It's a bunch of guys that do love to play music that I think have the skills, and they've kind of been thrown into the limelight because of being shout out by Jimmy Page, by Elton John, by getting a Grammy. They've got onto this hype train, this crazy hype train. But I think there's potential there, which is why, I'm willing to forgive them for being a Led Zeppelin tribute band.
There is potential there. You said three of them were brothers, right?
Yeah.
So there's potential there if they emancipate one of the siblings being the singer. Right. There's definite potential.
I thought you were gonna be like, because they're brothers, there's potential because like their DNA will make them strong. Hang on, they can eat the weak link, grow stronger themselves.
You just reminded me of something, Hattie. Did you guys not think that they had a huge sound for 4 guys.
Yeah, I was debating how many members there were, but there were definitely organs and strings underneath a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's a studio recording, and the amount of like exactly what Jack said, the amount of extra instrumentation that's down there. You know, double tracking. Like I said, I haven't really seen them live, so I don't know how that carries over. But
just because we were saying, I imagine it'd be quite easy to carry over nowadays with everyone in like earphones and stuff. But
right.
just because we mentioned double tracking, there's one point where they've double tracked things, but they're not synced completely with each other. Like they're not, studio done to the quantized to the 16th note to make sure everything's perfect and stuff. I thought that was really, really nice. Like it made me miss it, because that's something you wouldn't have bothered to do back in the 70s, because it would be such a ball ache to get it exactly right. But nowadays it's not as difficult, so everyone just makes everything the same, and it's just a bigger track with the minutest tiny changes. But yeah, this was like a proper, we're not even trying to hide it, they're different tracks playing the same thing. That was really nice. I'm in between you two, and I'm in control of where it goes, so I'm going to put it on back pat.
Yeah, split the difference.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to meet in the middle there. Have we had something that's been this kind of deviating between us across 3 tiers?
Yeah, Mr. Bungle.
Yeah.
Was that 3 tiers? Because I know you basically thought it was trash. And
no, it's not trash. No. I didn't say trash. Right. Nothing we've listened to so far has been trash.
Right. I think we've had stuff where, well, I don't know about that. So, but we did listen to that Bicep album. I think that
that wasn't trash, bro.
Mate, if I could get my time back for anything that I've done for this podcast, it would be the time I spent listening to that album. That waiting room of an album. But yeah, I think
music.
I think typically we'll have 2 votes one way and then 1 vote the other.
Yeah. Usually we're between 2 tiers, not 3. I find so. Yeah. It's interesting. But yeah. I can easily see why you would like it, or generally like the sound, Dennis. But an hour and 10 minutes or whatever. Nah, too much.
All right, let's leave it at that. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening. TRP Powered on Twitter. Like, comment, subscribe. It's been Dennis, Hattie, Jack, the Review Crew. Record Players. Peace.